Hare Krishna. So today we're continuing with our Iskana DC Bhakti Shastri course. We are moving on to a new chapter here in the Bhagavad Gita portion of the course. This is the 33rd part of the Bhagavad Gita portion, and it's we're going to cover today chapter 17 in its entirety. That's going to be verses 1 through 28. And the title of the chapter is called Divisions of Faith, different kinds of Shraddha. And as we'll see, it begins with a question from Arjuna, as oftentimes the chapters tend to do. But, of course, in the original Gita, there were no chapters, but we've identified them afterwards as kind of where the topics begin to change. And oftentimes the change is precipitated by a question, a question for more information or clarification of something from Arjuna. It sends the discussion off into a little slightly different direction. Here it's more going to be a situation where there's more clarification and a little bit more amplification and focus on the topic discussed in the previous chapter. The divine and demoniac natures, where we discovered that the divine nature persons follow the Vedas and become elevated, led towards liberation, and those who do not go downward into the demoniac or asura species of life, as Prabhupada says. So okay, let's start. We've got quite a few verses to cover today because of that. So Arjuna asks, he says, Arjuna inquired, this is verse 1, 17:1. O Krishna, what is the situation of those who do not follow the principles of Scripture, but worship according to their own imagination? Are they in goodness, in passion, or in ignorance? And here the word here is Shraddhaya, that Prabhupada calls imagination. It says Shraddhaya Anvita, they have full faith and nishta, a steady kind of firm faith. And Prabhupada calls it their own imagination, and that's because it isn't referring to the Vedas, which is an objective standard. But there's the word here is Shraddhaya, full faith, and Anvita, having full faith. And it's a word that will keep coming up, and it's called the divisions of faith, that's why. And in the purport, Prabhupada says, in the 4th chapter, 39th verse, it is said that a person faithful to a particular type of worship gradually becomes elevated to the stage of knowledge and attains the highest perfectional stage of peace and prosperity. In the 16th chapter, it is concluded that one who does not follow the principles laid down in the scriptures is called an asura, or a demon, and one who follows the scriptural injunction faithfully is called a deva, or demigod. Now, Prabhupada goes on, if one with faith follows some rules which are not mentioned in the scriptural injunctions, what is his position? This doubt of Arjuna's is to be cleared by Krishna. And he says, do those who do not follow the rules and regulations of the scriptures, but who have faith in something and worship gods and demigods and men, attain success in their effort? This also follows from at the end of the 16th chapter, 16:23. It says, he who discards scriptural injunctions and acts according to his own whims attains neither perfection nor happiness nor the supreme destination. And so discard scriptural injunctions means shastra vidhim, utsulija, the regulations of the scriptures giving up, and kama karataha, Prabhupada says acting whimsically in lust, according to one's desire. It was kind of a literal one. And according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Arjuna's question stems from the fact that some people, although not following the Vedas, act with faith and discipline rather than simply doing whatever they like. That's how he translates karma karataha, just doing whatever they do according to their own natures. They're not accepting any kind of any kind of objective standards of the Vedas, and so they do what they like. And so Arjuna seems to be questioning, especially that second part. Okay, they discard the scriptural injunctions. What happens if they have some other kind of faith and discipline, and don't just do whatever they like? Is that worth something? And the Prabhupada, though, he defines that karma kartaha in that verse as ignoring the Vedas, even though they are aware of the Vedic rules. So he kind of sees those two things as identical, giving up the rules of Scripture and acting whimsically as kind of the same thing. But if we look at it more just kind of doing what we want, then also this question of Arjuna's follows from that. There's those two things, not following the Vedas and acting whimsically. So he says, what if they don't act exactly whimsically, but they seem to perform seem to have some faith, they seem to do some worship, some sacrifices, Isn't that worth something? That's his question. And so Krishna then comes and answers. And in verse 2, he begins his answers. And he says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, according to the modes of nature acquired by the embodied soul, one's faith can be of three kinds: in goodness, in passion, or in ignorance. We're going to hear quite a bit more about the modes of nature. It's an ongoing topic. We heard chapter 14 focused on that, but we're going to keep hearing more details about that. As we even go through the 18th chapter, there's going to be more about it. And so he says, now hear about this. And Prabhupada says in the purport, those who know the rules and regulations of the scriptures, but out of laziness or indolence give up following these rules and regulations, are governed by the modes of material nature. According to their previous activities in the mode of goodness, passion, or ignorance, they acquire a nature which is of a specific quality. He says, but this nature can be changed if one associates with a bona fide spiritual master and abides by his rules and the scriptures. Gradually one can change his position from ignorance to goodness, or from passion to goodness. And so what Krishna is telling him right now is, this is what we'll find out throughout the chapter, is that if somebody isn't following the objective standards of the Vedas, because the standards of the Vedas, they're objective. You follow them, and it might not be exactly what you have in mind, but they're objective. They're not subjective. Whereas as somebody who gives them up, they're just acting by the dictations of their mind and their senses. The particular, we talked about how the modes of nature kind of have certain attitudes and qualities and understandings and outlooks. All these things are there's like a whole constellation of qualities associated with these modes of nature. You see things a certain way. You have a certain attitude. There's so many different things that are governed by the modes. And so it says that people who don't have an objective standard for behavior, they're just doing what kind of comes naturally to them. And so it's just coming out of the combination of the modes and doesn't have any real value, because it's by subjecting yourself to certain objective standards that you can act in ways, and we'll see this, act in ways that are higher than where you are right now. You may be in ignorance primarily, but if you act according to the scriptures, you're acting in goodness, or you're acting in passion, you can move your way up. But if you simply do things according to your own, like the prophet says, whims, or imagination, then you just continue that same cycle. You can't, there's nothing to grab onto to elevate yourself. The Vedas are giving you a way to pull yourself up. But if you're just doing what you already want to do, and the sacrifices and other kind of worship you're doing is just coming out of your own, ordinary mentality, then there's nothing there to help you to get better, to improve. You just stay on the same platform, and actually you just continue to reinforce the platform you're on. That's what Krishna's going to say. And then Prabhupada mentions this other thing. There's the three modes of material nature, and then there's bhakti. And this is going to come up even more strongly at the end of the chapter, that we heard how mode of goodness takes you up, a mode of passion kind of keeps you in the middle, and mode of ignorance takes you down in the universal scale of things, scheme of things. And so the mode of goodness can take you up. We'll talk about this also more. Can take you all the way up to the plants of the sages and Lord Brahma, and it's not bad. It gives you a good platform actually for moving onward. Whereas the mode of passion, keeps you either maybe going up to the heavenly planets but coming back down. It just isn't very stable, and the mode of ignorance is pushing you downward, and it's very dangerous. And so the other thing, of course, this is what Krishna has been telling us to do since early in the second chapter, to transcend the modes. And so bhakti aims at anything that transcendence, and aims beyond all the material modes of nature to Krishna. And so, at the end of the chapter, Krishna is going to recommend that again. That's the whole purpose of Bhagavad Gita is to lead people to bhakti. So that's how it works. Okay, so let's look at text 3. O son of Bharat, according to one's existence under the various modes of nature, sattva anurupa, one evolves a particular kind of faith. The living being is said to be of a particular faith according to the mode he has acquired. Like I said, the modes of nature, they determine whether we have, so many desires or few desires, whether we have all kinds of energy or very little energy, whether we're optimistic or depressed or peaceful. Prabhupada calls them, how does he call them? He says the happy, active, and helpless. If you're in the mode of goodness, you're happy. In the mode of passion, you're active. And in the mode of ignorance, you're helpless. And so you have a certain understanding, the way you view the world, the way you interact with the world, and so that will, a particular type of faith, something you have, you believe in, something that you have confidence in, something that you can, stand by, comes out of you according to your particular modes, if you don't have the Vedas to guide you. So Prabhupada says, everyone has a particular type of faith, regardless of what he is. But his faith is considered good, passionate, or ignorant according to the nature he has acquired. And now he's talking about bhakti. Pure goodness is transcendental. In purified goodness, one can understand the real nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As long as one's faith is not completely in purified goodness, the faith is subject to contamination by any of the modes of material nature. And then he says, thus we find different types of faith in this world, and there are different types of religions due to different types of faith. The real principle of religious faith is situated in the mode of pure goodness. But because the heart is tainted, we find different types of religious principles. Thus, according to different types of faith, there are different kinds of worship. And then, again, he talks about bhakti. He says, if one is situated in Krishna consciousness, then that path is guaranteed for his elevation to the perfectional stage. If one does not take to this path of self-realization, then he is surely to be conducted by the influence of the modes of material nature. So Prabhupada is emphasizing, and he'll do it again and again and again, and this is Krishna's emphasis throughout the Gita, that the only really recommended thing is to try to transcend the modes and take up bhakti. Although the mode of goodness is not so bad compared to the others. That's what we'll find out. And we've found that out already. But still, it doesn't meet the standard. In 17.4, men in the mode of goodness worship the demigods. Those in the mode of passion worship the demons. This is the yaksha rakshangsi, the yakshas and rakshasas. And those in the mode of ignorance worship ghosts and spirits. This is the pretan and bhuta ganan. And different people say different things about that. Some say that the pretas are Brahmins who have fallen, and other ones say that they're just really harmful spirits. And some people say the bhutas are the associates of Lord Shiva, So anyway, they're kind of ghostly spirit type things anyway, and usually in the mode of ignorance. And so here, so it says there's the Devan, the demigods, the Yaksha Rakshangsi, the Prabhupada says demons, he just kind of lumps them in there, Pretan, spirits of the dead, and Bhutaganan, ghosts. So they have us, each of the persons in the different modes. These are people not following the Vedas, at least according to Prabhupada and Baladev Vidyabhushan. That Krishna is immediately answering Arjuna's question. What about these people? So he says, well, they may have faith, but that faith is governed by their nature, so they have a certain understanding and desire. And so ones and so it means that they are actually, very heavily in the modes of passion and ignorance. We saw that in the last chapter, that those, more in the mode of goodness are going to follow the scriptures, and those, more deeply in the modes of passion and ignorance are not going to be able to follow them. So Prabhupada says, according to scriptural injunction, only the Supreme Personality of Godhead is worshipable, but those who are not very conversant with or faithful to the scriptural injunctions worship different objects according to their specific situations in the modes of material nature. The purport is that those who are completely purified of the material modes of nature and who are transcendently situated can worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Again, Prabhupada is emphasizing bhakti. In conclusion, the different qualities of the material modes of nature can be purified through association with persons who are of transcendental nature. One thing Prabhupada is also emphasizing here is that, bhakti is open to everybody. And so even the folks here who are disregarding the Vedas, with the proper association, they can become devotees of the Lord. Where otherwise, according to Krishna in the last chapter, once they've begin to act without following the Vedas, they just go down and down and down perpetually. There's seemingly no way forward for them. But here Prabhupada is saying, if they meet the devotees through association and the mercy of the devotees, they can take up the path of devotional service. So I thought I brought a little graphic here, because you'll see the terms, goodness, passion, ignorance used in many different places, and they're used in kind of different contexts, and so sometimes it can get a little confusing. And so what I have this little color wheel here. There's three primary colors: yellow, red, and blue, and all of the other colors that are possible are made of different proportions of those colors. My color wheel here is a little bit simplistic, because in effect, all of the entities, living entities, have some element of all of three of the modes, different proportions of them. So here we have my little simplistic color wheel. Sometimes there's only single ones, and there's two of them. That the greens are combinations of the blue and the yellow and don't have any red in them. But in real life, in the modes of material nature, you have some of everything, and in different proportions. But in the same way that you can produce so many colors, different colors, with different proportions of these three colors, there's a whole lot of different types of entities out there that are different from one another, that they won't have exactly the same type of characteristics, because they have different proportions of those things. So many times when we hear about something or someone being in the mode of goodness, and something or someone else in the mode of passion, and somebody else in the mode of ignorance, it's a comparison between that particular group of beings. Like it says, the demigods are in the mode of goodness, the human beings in the mode of passion, and the animals and plants in the mode of ignorance. But amongst animals, the cow is in the mode of goodness, the lion in the mode of passion, the monkey in the mode of ignorance. So it's the amount of those things in comparison with each other. You take that small group and you compare them. So the compared to the sages and Brahma, the devas have a lot more passion. and the Devas have the sages have a lot more goodness. So it's within it's usually it's a comparison within a certain group when it talks about, such and such is in passion, such and such is in goodness, such and such is in ignorance. So we'll see that here also, because Prabhupada said those who follow the Vedas are generally more in the mode of goodness, and those who don't are more in the passion, modes of passion and ignorance. But then within those categories, within the people that are following the Vedas, there are some more in goodness, more in passion. Even Vishwanath says even some of them more in ignorance. And then amongst those who don't, who are already predominantly mode of passion and ignorance, they also have some of them are more good, some of them are more passionate, some are more ignorant. So it's within the categories that you have variation. So sometimes you can see the word used, and you go, well, are human beings in the mode of goodness? Are they the same as the cows? And it's not. The human beings are, as a class, have more goodness than the animals. But if you just look at the animals, the cow has more goodness. That's how you look at it. And there's so many different combinations. The destinations will be a little bit different. That's why ultimately in chapter 14 it was saying how people go up, they stay in the middle, or go down according to the modes, because there's many different potential destinations. So I have a little chart here to look at that. So those who follow the Vedas, the Devas, they're more in goodness, like we said. And by following the Vedas, they are acting according to external standards rather than acting according to their desires. Therefore, they have the ability to change their nature. We talked about that last time, when Krishna explained the qualities of the Devas, and it was broken down into different qualities that were especially appropriate for different types of people, different varnas, different ashrams. And so, like we heard, that the Shudras, who are generally considered to be amongst humans, very much in the mode of ignorance, if they have that certain quality of being submissive to the higher castes, and serving them nicely, they can. That's goodness. That's part of that Prabhupada called it the divine nature for them, and they can move upward, even though they're in the mode of goodness, because they take that objective standard of following the Vedas, which say that they're supposed to serve the higher castes. Then they're acting in the mode of goodness. See, they're acting in a higher mode, even though they're in a lower mode, and that allows them to improve. So they grab onto, it's like grab onto a rope that helps to pull them up. Where otherwise you can't, if you don't have the Vedas. You just do what you already do, and you can't make any progress that way. So those acting in goodness, amongst this group, those who are more in goodness than those who can't follow, those who have a lot of goodness within that group, they follow the Vedas without desire for the fruits of their activities. This is what one of the first things that Krishna tried to get Arjuna to do: fight for the sake of fighting. And that can take you up to the planets of the sages, can take you up even to Lord Brahma's planet. It tends to take you up into it's the closest thing to a good place in the material world, because people live up there for the rest of the existence of the universe. They have really good association up there. They have a real good chance of making further spiritual progress. And then those acting in passion follow the Vedas for the fruits. That's like when Krishna told Arjuna at the beginning that the warriors are happy when the battles like this happen, because it opens the doors to the heavenly planets. So if people perform the Vedic duties because they promise something material, and they do, it's a gambit for people to at least take up the Vedas. You want to enjoy, right? Well, do you want to really enjoy? Here's how you do it. And but that doesn't put you in a very good spot, because you accumulate good karma, you go up, and you burn the karma off, and you come back down. It's a very quick cycle back, and then if you're lucky, you try to do it again. But you might slip up, and you end up going down. So it's not so stable. And then those who do not follow the Vedas, the Asuras, as called in the last chapter, they're proportionally more in passion and ignorance. That's what keeps them from having the ability to follow the Vedas. Those with the most goodness in this category worship the Devas. Those with more passion worship demons, and those with the most ignorance worship ghosts and spirits. But all of them, they remain in the Asura platform because they cannot improve themselves without having an objective standard that's given to them through the Vedas. They're just acting out of their own, perhaps as whimsy or imagination. So 17.5 and 6 is those who undergo severe austerities and penances not recommended in the scriptures, performing them out of pride and egoism, who are impelled by lust and attachment, who are foolish and who torture the material elements of the body as well as the supersoul dwelling within, are known to be demons, known as demons. So here they may be doing very very severe austerities and penances and so many things, but it's not helping them. It's pretty clear, huh? Foolish. And Prabhupada says, there are persons who manufacture modes of austerity and penance, which are not mentioned in the scriptural injunctions. He says, their acts are against the scriptural injunctions and are not beneficial for the people in general. Actually, they act out of pride, false ego, lust, and attachment for material enjoyment. By such activities, not only is the combination of material elements of which the body is constructed disturbed, but also the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself living within the body. He says, persons of normal mental condition must obey the scriptural injunctions. Those who are not in such a position neglect and disobey the scriptures and manufacture their own way of austerities and penances. One should always remember the ultimate end of the demoniac people, as described in the previous chapter. They keep going down. So that's what Prabhupada is saying. This is what's going to happen to them. Even though they seem not to be acting whimsically. They seem to be, to be under some kind of discipline and really, discomfort and so many things. But it's not. It's something that's coming, it's natural to them. They're trying to gain power. And they're trying to show off, and they're trying to do these kinds of things. So it's actually according to their nature. Usually, penances and austerities, we're working against acting in ways that we wouldn't ordinarily do. We like to enjoy. We don't want to do sacrifices. We don't want to do penances. So those are supposed to help to purify our desires. But this kind of stuff is coming naturally to them. Actually. They're coming up with it, and it feels quite good to them. It just reinforces all the negativities behind it. Their pride and ego and lust and desire for power and to hurt others. So Krishna is saying it's not working out for them. And then 7, it says, even the food each person prefers is of 3 kinds, according to the 3 modes of material nature. The same is true of sacrifices, austerities, and charity. Now hear of the distinctions between them. So now we're going to hear something more about the modes kind of in general. And these help us, even in bhakti, because Prabhupada says that even when we take up the path of bhakti, we're trying to, first of all, come to the mode of goodness. Bhakti helps us to come to the mode of goodness, then purifies that and takes us to transcendence. And we saw previously how actions in certain modes of nature reinforce those modes. So if we act in the mode of goodness, we become, the mode of goodness increases more. Act in the mode of passion, passion increases more, and the same with ignorance. So here we're going to find ways. So we're looking to at least move towards the mode of passion. I'm sorry, mode of, maybe some of us, I guess it's a Freudian slip there. I'm looking to come to the mode of passion out of ignorance, but we're trying to come to the mode of goodness. And so if we see how people in those modes act, we may be able to act in those ways better, and it can help us. So the things that are going to be discussed here are food, sacrifices, austerities, and charity. So we'll get a rundown of what they look like in the various modes here. And Prabhupada says, in terms of different situations in the modes of material nature, there are differences in the manner of eating and performing sacrifices, austerities, and charities. They are not all conducted on the same level. And that's the entire purport, actually. Some of these have very small purports. And then 17.8, Foods dear to those in the mode of goodness increase the duration of life, purify one's existence. This is Ayu, like, Ayurveda, Ayu, duration of life. Purify one's existence, give strength, bala, health, arogya. Arogya means disease, so it gives health, or prevents disease anyway. Shuka, happiness, priti, satisfaction, vivardhana, increasing satisfaction and health, rasaya, juicy or tasty, snigdha, fatty. Other people say it's appealing or mild. That's snigdha. Sthira, enduring. So it's they have substantial. Hridaya, pleasing to the heart. And those are in the mode of goodness. And so there's a purport here from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur that's a little bit interesting. Prabhupada actually takes this up when he talks about the foods in the mode of ignorance. He kind of sums up his commentary all in those. He doesn't have any purport in this one. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains it a bit, so I thought it was interesting to look here. So it is well known that sattvic foods increase the lifespan, ayu. They also increase the strength of will, sattva, as well as physical strength, freedom from disease, happiness, and delightfulness in eating them. The food should be tasty or juicy, rasya. Sattvic food should thus be mild, snigdha, he calls it mild. Prabhupada says it's fatty. The foam of milk, though tasty and mild, is insubstantial. Sattvic food should be substantial with long-lasting effect in the body, sthira. Sattvic food should thus also be beneficial to the heart, stomach, and other organs. So when he says pleasing to the heart, he says it means it's healthy for all the organs of the body as well. He says, thus it is understood that foods such as rice, wheat, other grains, milk, and sugar are dear to the sattvic people because they have all four of the above mentioned qualities. And we'll see Prabhupada repeat that part pretty much to a T. He adds vegetables to it. Prabhupada does. Prabhupada says snigdha, fatty, and that does follow those other things. But Gurudev says appealing, and Vishwanath says mild. There's some kind of a little different takes on that word. And then 17.9, foods that are too bitter, too sour, salty, hot, pungent, dry, and burning are dear to those in the mode of passion. Such foods cause distress, misery, and disease. And again, Prabhupada will take this up in the next verse he'll mention. And so here, both Baladev, Vidyabhushan, and Vishwanath say in this list the adjective extremely should be added to each quality. Right, so all the ones, extremely bitter, extremely sour, extremely salty, extremely hot, extremely pungent, extremely dry, extremely burning. He says it should be like that. Because in Ayurveda, you use all of those tastes to some degree. And that sometimes it's balanced towards which kind of constitution you have, that kind of stuff. But too extremely is in the mode of passion. That's how he puts it. So he says in this list, the adjective extremely should be added to each quality. A very bitter food, katu, means food such as neem. Very sour, very salty, and very hot foods, he says, are well known. It seems like in this case, hot means temperature. Because the hot, spicy hot comes from the tikshna, he calls it sharp food or pungent foods. A very sour, it's very sharp foods, that's how he calls tikshna or pungent, are turmeric root and other items or pepper. Very drying foods, ruksha, are hing and kodrva, which I don't know what kodrva is. Burning foods, vidahina, are those that cause internal heat, such as roasted chickpeas. So they raise the body temperature, apparently. Which it means burning. Then in 1710, we hear about the mode of ignorance. Food prepared more than 3 hours before being eaten. Food that is tasteless, decomposed, and putrid. And food consisting of remnants and untouchable things is dear to those in the mode of darkness. And Prabhupada does give he gives a pretty long purport here, and he addresses the previous two verses along with this one here in this purport. He says, the purpose of food is to increase the duration of life, purify the mind, and aid bodily strength. This is its only purpose. In the past, great authorities selected those foods that best aid health and increase life's duration, such as milk products, sugar, rice, wheat, fruits, and vegetables. These foods are very dear to those in the mode of goodness. So it sounds a lot like what Vishwanath said. And he says, foods in the mode of passion, which are bitter, too salty, or too hot, or overly mixed with red pepper, cause misery by reducing the mucus in the stomach, leading to disease. So it's interesting. He gives a cause for that. And any food cooked more than 3 hours before it is eaten, and Prabhupada says, except prasadam, food offered to the Lord, is considered to be in the mode of darkness. And he says, remnants of food may be eaten only when they are part of a meal that was first offered to the Supreme Lord, or first eaten by saintly persons, especially the spiritual master. So we know that eating the Krishna's remnants, or the spiritual master's remnants, or a Vaishnava's remnants is a very glorious thing. So Prabhupada is clear to mention that this is not in the mode of ignorance. This is in the mode of purified goodness, actually. Okay, so that's what that looks like in the three modes, and those are just naturally, those types of foods are naturally attracted to persons in those particular modes. Now, sacrifices, the sacrifice performed according to the directions of Scripture, as a matter of duty, by those who desire no reward, is of the nature of goodness. So you can see that was what Krishna tried to get when we talked about this nishkama karma yoga, where you do your duty without desire for the results. That was what Krishna taught Arjuna very early on in the Bhagavad Gita, that this is in the mode of goodness. That leads one, it frees one from so many karmas and leads one to the plants of the sages. So that attitude. Doing the right thing because it's the right thing, not because it's going to produce something positive. And Prabhupada says, the general tendency is to offer sacrifice with some purpose in mind, but here it is stated that sacrifice should be performed without any such desire. It should be done as a matter of duty. One should go to a temple or church as a matter of duty, offer respect to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and offer flowers and eatables without any purpose of obtaining material benefit. So that, and of course, if we're doing it, if we're worshiping Krishna with that becomes bhakti, and can be transcendental. If we're just, if we're, doing some other type of dharma, or we're doing it, but we're doing it without desire for the payoff. This is what we're supposed to do. That leads us to the higher plans of the sages and beyond. But if we're dealing directly with, as it says here, offer respect to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and offer something, that becomes bhakti. So that's a better thing even. It's not surprising that Prabhupada gives us that recommendation. He's our well-wisher. But the sacrifice performed for some material benefit, or for the sake of pride, O chief of the Bharatas, you should know to be in the mode of passion. And so that's we are caught under the control of Krishna says the kama, lust or desire. That's we're born with that, and so we have the natural desire. Also, even just as spirits, Prabhupada says we're naturally enjoyers. We naturally want to be happy. We seek happiness. And we just seek it in the wrong way here in the material world. And so if left to our own devices, we'll just do whatever we can come up with to try to attain what we want and to be happy. We won't follow any kind of rules. Whatever seems to be effective. Nice guys finish last. And so Krishna, gives the the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas and says, hey, you guys want to enjoy, right? And sure. And you don't want to suffer, right? Because that's the problem, right? If you do all kinds of sinful things trying to be happy, actually you're going to suffer. Right? So he says, look, I have a way. You're going to have to be a little more disciplined, but if you do this, you're going to be able to enjoy, and you're going to not have to suffer so much. It's a good deal. So Prabhupada says, sometimes sacrifices and rituals are performed for elevation to the heavenly kingdom or for some material benefits in this world. Such sacrifices or ritualistic performances are considered to be in the mode of passion. And it says sometimes, apparently from the verse, it's also sometimes people are looking for a little recognition from that. As it says, for the sake of pride. What is it? Damba artam. So for the sake of pride or for the sake of the result. It's mode of passion. Sometimes people like to do things a little bit more ostentatiously, so they're seen to do it. Text 13, any sacrifice performed without regard for the directions of Scripture, without distribution of prasadam, ashrishta anam, so it's vidihina, against in defiance of the Scriptures, without chanting of Vedic hymns, mantrahinam, and remunerations for the priests, dakshinam, adakshinam, it says, without dakshin, and without faith, is considered to be in the mode of ignorance. And so faith in this case would mean goodness type of faith that would make you want to follow the Scriptures. We'll see faith used in various ways throughout the chapter. So it means without that kind of faith that makes you follow the Vedic Scriptures. It's if there's a faith, it's this kind that just comes from your own nature. It's a kind of an inbuilt faith that comes from your own distorted view of the world and yourself. So these things are mode of ignorance. Generally, that's what you see. So in standard goodness and passion, you follow the Vedas. In ignorance, you don't. And but in goodness, you're not looking for the result. You understand there's something higher. In passion, you're looking for the result. That's your motivation. And in the transcendental mode, in bhakti, we're also not looking for the result, but we're worshiping Krishna, trying to please Him, and that adds the ingredient that takes us beyond the material world altogether. Prabhupada says, faith in the mode of darkness or ignorance is actually faithlessness. So he kind of explains that there, right? Because it says here, without faith. So he says, and so he kind of he seems to acknowledge that we talked about this kind of stuff as being one of the kinds of faith for those people who don't follow the Vedas. But he says faith in the mode of darkness or ignorance is actually faithlessness. So it fits. Sometimes people worship some demigod just to make money and then spend the money for recreation, ignoring the scriptural injunctions. Such ceremonial shows of religiosity are not accepted as genuine. They are all in the mode of darkness. They produce a demonic mentality and do not benefit human society. So again, it just reinforces their already negative state. And when you act in your own condition, you just reinforce that. So it's by taking hold of the Vedas that you can act in higher modes than you are in now and can go upwards. And if you take the path of bhakti, you can be freed from the modes altogether, ultimately. So 1714, austerity of the body consists in worship of the Supreme Lord. The Brahmanas, this is a Deva, Prabhupada says the Supreme Lord, and the purport he says also it can be the Devatas. Austerity of the body consists in worship of the Supreme Lord, the Brahmanas, the spiritual master, the superiors, here it says pragya, and worshipful personalities. He says superiors like the father and mother, and in cleanliness, simplicity, celibacy, and non-violence. Here it says we're going to talk about these 3 verses. Vishwanath says, speaking of 3 types of austerity, first the Lord speaks of 3 types of sattvic austerity in 3 verses, and it's going to be in the standard 3 categories: body, mind, and words, or body, words, and mind. I think that goes this time. The sannyasis, the Vaishnava sannyasis, they have the tridanda. They're supposed to serve the Lord with those 3 things: body, mind, and words. And so these are kind of the ways that we interact with those are our physical and subtle physical bodies. Right? We do things physically, we do things mentally, and we speak. And those pretty much cover it. And so somebody in the mode of goodness, this is how they use their body, and this is called austerity. And that means proper functioning of the body. So he says, Prabhupada says, first he explains the austerities and penances practiced by the body. One should offer, or learn to offer, respect to God or to the demigods. So he says Deva can be either one of those 2 things. Of course, God is better. That makes it bhakti. That's the difference between just material mode of goodness and pure goodness. The perfect qualified brahmanas and the spiritual master and superiors, like father, mother, he says, or any person who is conversant with Vedic knowledge. Those are the worshipable people. And he says one should practice cleansing oneself externally and internally, and he should learn to become simple in behavior. So Prabhupada usually when Shocham, cleanliness is mentioned, Prabhupada is sure to mention that it's not only external, but it's also internal. And usually he'll say that internal cleanliness comes from the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So cleanses the subtle body here. And he says he should not do anything which is not sanctioned by the scriptural injunctions. And then he explains celibacy. This is especially in the Vaishnava way. He should not indulge in sex outside of married life, for sex is sanctioned in the scripture only in marriage, not otherwise. This is called celibacy. You'll note that in the verse the word is brahmacharyam. And but here, within the bhakti tradition, Prabhupada mentions earlier in the Bhagavad Gita that the impersonalists, nobody can take up the path of impersonalism unless they're completely celibate and renounced, and there's no grihastas in real hardcore impersonalist traditions. And but he says in bhakti, because you can still serve Krishna, you can raise children. He says you can make more devotees by raising children. You can. So many ways you can serve Krishna. It's not required to be a brahmachari. But there is still restriction. Then in 15, austerity of speech. So next is words, body, words. It's body, words, and mind. They're kind of more from grosser to subtler. Austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature, svadhyaya, Vedic study. So it's this vakmayam of the voice, the austerity of the voice. And we see that sometimes we tempted to speak things that are not quite truthful. We might, inadvertently or intentionally want them not to be pleasing. We may not care so much whether it's beneficial, and we may wish to agitate others by them. We'll notice our words sometimes do these things, and so here we're speaking the truth but trying to make it pleasing. Anyway, we'll see something here in the purport. Prabhupada. He says one should not speak in such a way as to agitate the minds of others. Of course, when a teacher speaks, he can speak the truth for the instruction of his students, but such a teacher should not speak to those who are not his students if he will agitate their minds. But he also does it pleasingly. It's interesting. I mean, not always. Sometimes it says that the spiritual master, the sadhu, can be cutting. We hear when Vidura was talking to his elder brother Dhritarashtra, he really, in order to get through to him, he had to be harsh. He was just look at yourself. What a low state you've come to. that you were trying to kill the Pandavas on behalf of your son Duryodhana. They've killed all of your sons. And now you're living at the house, you're just like a dog in their house. How can you be so shameless now that you've lost? And so that wasn't very pleasing, but it was beneficial. And he was set out of love. He wanted to do something to save his brother. Otherwise, His Holiness Giriraj Swami has spoken. He said that there were times when Prabhupada gave him some firm corrections, and he says not all the time was it really pleasing for him to hear that. And he says he received a letter from Prabhupada one time. I can only paraphrase it, but he said that Prabhupada was saying how his only desire is for his students to make progress. So he says, if you receive some criticism, please take it in that spirit. So it was very pleasing. So the thing that was truthful and maybe not pleasing to the senses, he said it in a very sweet way. He showed this is why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because it's beneficial for you. I want I'm doing it out of love. I'm doing it out of concern and care for you. So that's a way even to make something that isn't externally pleasing to be pleasing. So Giriraj Maharaj said when he read that, then he was very completely pacified by that understanding where the correction and criticism was coming from and why it was coming. And Prabhupada says, besides that, one should not talk nonsense. The process of speaking in spiritual circles is to say something upheld by the scriptures. He mentions also that we should be able to support our statements by the scriptures. At the same time, such talk should be very pleasurable to the ear. By such discussions, one may derive the highest benefit and elevate human society. So sometimes we get caught up in our discussions, and we're not always very pleasurable to the ear. We scriptural debate and discussing how to serve Krishna the best, is legitimate and valuable types of discussions. But we should. I remember Mother Urmila was saying that in the spiritual world there are also disagreements. But there's two things that are important to that. First of all, those disagreements are all about how to serve Krishna the best. And secondly, they're done without this kind of animosity. They're done without bad personal feelings towards one another, and acrimony and animosity and such things. And so I think of us, our society, and I think that many times I think we do a decent job of the keeping it about Krishna. Not always, but I think we do a fair job of that at least. But sometimes there's a bit of animosity that creeps up. Because if everybody who was ever called a demon by some other devotee really was, well, we wouldn't have many devotees left. And then Prabhupada says there's a limitless stock of Vedic literature, and one should study this. This is called penance of speech. Okay? So, because these three are important, since these are in the mode of goodness. So applicable also to us here in Bhakti. And satisfaction, simplicity, gravity, self-control, there's silence in here. Gravity, he calls it. Maunam, silence, he calls gravity. Self-control, purification of one's existence, samshuddhi, are the austerities of the mind. These are interesting. Prabhupada says, and Prabhupada, I took the purport a little bit out of order because there was one theme that kept coming up, and I wanted to emphasize that. He says, to make the mind austere is to detach it from sense gratification. Satisfaction of the mind can be obtained only by taking the mind away from thoughts of sense enjoyment. And so here we have the more we think of sense enjoyment, the more the mind becomes dissatisfied. Control of the mind means detaching the mind from sense enjoyment. So there's a little common theme there that emphasizes I guess one of the main thrusts of the austerity of the mind is that our, of course, and we do that naturally if we're serving. And that's the one thing about bhakti that's great, is that by serving naturally, if you're thinking of somebody else and their welfare, then you're taking at least away some of the time that we have in order to think about our own self. And so, so that helps to do that. And then someone in the mode of goodness, again, they're just thinking that they're going to simply, but that they actually have an experience of inner happiness, and they think that they just by doing the right thing, that's useful enough in itself. And then he says the best course is to divert the mind. So then he gives how we should think about. First, not what we shouldn't think about sense gratification. that helps us out so much. You can accomplish some of these goals. He says, but then what you do is to divert the mind to the Vedic literature, which is full of satisfying stories, such as in the Puranas and the Mahabharata. And he says silence means that one is always thinking of self-realization. So that's the other thing we think about. Think about self-realization. Think about the philosophy and the scriptures. And then he says, interesting. He says it should be so trained that it can always think of doing good for others. And especially, from our point of view as bhaktas, this is really important. Because we focus on serving the Lord, but even in the definition of pure bhakti, we'll see this when we go into the nectar of devotion. In Rupa Goswami's definition of pure bhakti, where it says that we're serving Krishna Anushilanam, he says Krishna means not just Krishna, but his other expansions and also things related to him, like his devotees. He says just Krishna is too narrow of a definition. So it's intended that also his devotees and others are worshipable. And of course, ultimately it means all of the spiritual souls. And we know that this is us also service to Krishna. He wants the spirit souls to come back to him. So if we're thinking about others, those of us who are on the path, those of us who haven't taken up the path, this is a very positive meditation for the mind. It takes us off of the notion of how we can be happy ourselves. So when we do this, when we think of others, we naturally become happy, especially if we do it in the service of the Lord. And this is something we tend to get caught up, in it's our path back to Godhead. I have my story and my history, and I'm trying to go back. But so much of bhakti means that it's the path of compassion. It's the path where we see the value in others. We've gotten the devotion through mercy, and we want to extend that to others. And so this is very important. So not thinking about sense enjoyment, thinking about self-realization, the philosophy and the stories of the Vedas, and thinking of how you can do good for others, Krishna and also other living beings. And that's recommended to help us in moving towards the mode of goodness. 17, this threefold austerity, and here Prabhupada uses the word transcendental paraya, performed with transcendental faith by men not expecting material benefits, but engaged only for the sake of the Supreme, is called austerity in goodness. So here, Prabhupada, it just says, and here it doesn't say the paraya, the transcendental part. If you use, otherwise other people define it as just very strong faith. So you can look at this verse in two ways. Prabhupada seems to be looking at it in a bhakti way, because he says, for the sake of the Supreme. That seems to be a purportful translation. I can't see anything in the verse that says, it just says shradaya with faith, paraya transcendental or very strong faith, taptam executed tapa austerity, tat that, trivadam, three kinds, narai by men, apala akankshabi who are without desires for fruits, yuktai engaged, satvikam in the mode of goodness, parachachti is called. So it doesn't say explicitly anything about the Supreme. So you can look at it just as in the material mode of goodness, right? Which means it's just a very strong faith. And Prabhupada even called that the mode of goodness in the last chapter. He used that divya as transcendental, even though he explained how it was really kind of the mode of goodness which led towards transcendence. Here we can take it like if transcendental faith means we worship the Supreme and it takes us to the purified mode of goodness beyond the material world. Otherwise, you can read it as just the material mode of goodness, where you have strong faith in the scriptures and strong faith in the Vedic literature that allows you to practice these kind of austerities without any particular desire for the apala akankshabi, without desires for the fruits. In any case, if we're bhaktas, and so why not look at it in the way that's given here, that we should do these things in that way. These things are in the mode of goodness, but we should do it for the Supreme. That makes it bhakti, and that makes the faith even better. So Prabhupada is seeing in that paraya, he's seeing bhakti in that. That it's not just normal faith, it's this superior or transcendental faith, and that would mean by necessity that you're dealing with the Supreme. So even though the Supreme doesn't happen, that's how Prabhupada seems to be reading the verse. He just sees that paraya and then thinks of Krishna. 18, penance performed out of pride and for the sake of gaining respect, honor, and worship is said to be in the mode of passion. It is neither stable nor permanent. It's chalam and adruvam. That's what he says. So, pride from mana, for looking for pride, puja, worship, for the sake of with pride and for the sake of worship and honor. That's said to be in the mode of passion. And so Prabhupada says, sometimes penance and austerity are executed to attract people and receive honor, respect, and worship from others. Persons in the mode of passion arrange to be worshipped by subordinates and let them wash their feet and offer riches. Such arrangements artificially made by the performance of penances are considered to be in the mode of passion. The results are temporary and they can be continued for some time, but they are not permanent. It's interesting how Prabhupada spins this one here. First, he says that penances and austerity are executed to attract people and receive honor, respect, and worship from others. So, generally we'll think that that's, some kind of penances and austerity that they do. But then he says here, persons may, orchestrate some ritual where they're worshipped. And that will, and of course, if people see you being worshipped, they may think that you're worthy of such a thing. So it's interesting how he gives that other a possibility there, that persons may, they may do some kind of worship themselves or some penances, but also then they may be worshipped. And that's in the mode of passion, to increase their own fame, advertise themselves in that way. Quite interesting. And then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, the austerity performed with ostentation for the purpose of verbal respect by others, who will say he is a great man, for the purpose of gaining bodily respect from others by having them stand up when he approaches, and for the purpose of gaining mental respect from others, which will manifest in the future as gifts of money and other things, is rajasic or passionate austerity. Its results are very temporary if they appear at all, and it is uncertain that they will appear. That's how he translates chalam and adruvam. And then penance performed out of, this is 19, penance performed out of foolishness with self-torture or to destroy or injure others is said to be in the mode of ignorance. And it's not surprising that Prabhupada mentions in the purport who he mentions. says, there are instances of foolish penance undertaken by demons like Hiranyakashipu, who performed austere penances to become immortal and kill the demigods. So there he was. He says he prayed to Brahma for such things, but ultimately he was killed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. To undergo penances for something which is impossible is certainly in the mode of ignorance. So there are both things there. He says it's foolish, right? Because he was trying to get something he couldn't, immortality, and it was done to harm others. And that was why he was doing it. Somebody more in the mode of passion just wants something. He doesn't necessarily have so much animosity and destructive tendency towards others. He just wants to have happiness for himself. So there's a certain, there's that tamas gives that anger and that vindictiveness and wanting to destroy, right? That mode of ignorance is a destructive mode. So you want to also, it's destructive to yourself and to others. So those are the penances. And then charity given out of duty without expectation of return at the proper time and place and to a worthy person is considered to be in the mode of goodness. So we see a tendency, a trend here, right? Following the Vedas again, right? And just because it's the right thing to do. So you do it in the right way according to what the Vedas say, not just whimsically, and you do it without any particular reward. That doing the right thing is sufficient in itself. That's what you're thinking. You do the right thing for the right reason, and the right reason is that it is because it is the right thing. And so Prabhupada, I think this is the entire purport I've got here because it's fairly short. In the Vedic literature, charity given to a person engaged in spiritual activities is recommended. So again, Prabhupada wants to take it up to the level of transcendence. There is no recommendation for giving charity indiscriminately. Spiritual perfection is always a consideration, he says. Therefore, charity is recommended to be given at a place of pilgrimage, and at lunar or solar eclipses, or at the end of the month, or to a qualified Brahmana or a Vaishnava devotee, or in temples. Such charity should be given without any consideration of return. Charity to the poor is sometimes given out of compassion, but if a poor man is not worth giving charity to, then there is no spiritual advancement. In other words, indiscriminate charity is not recommended in the Vedic literatures. Again, we want good, in the mode of goodness, you want to have good effects. We'll see here that there can be ill effects if it's not given rightly. At 21, but charity performed with the expectation of some return, with a desire for fruitive results, or in a grudging mood, is said to be charity in the mode of passion. So you want to get something out of it, right? Some benefit from it. You give to a charity and you want some control over it or something. With a desire for fruitive results, again, it's good karma you want to get out of it, or in a grudging mood. It's the right thing to do, but you really don't want to. Prabhupada says, charity is sometimes performed for elevation to the heavenly kingdom, and sometimes with great trouble and with repentance afterwards. Why have I spent so much in this way? He says, they ask themselves. Charity is also sometimes given under some obligation at the request of a superior. These kinds of charity are said to be given in the mode of passion. This is purport for that. 22, we're having to move fairly quickly here because of the length of the chapter. And charity performed at an impure place, at an improper time, to unworthy persons, or without proper attention and respect, is said to be in the mode of ignorance. Again, no Vedas, and in fact, exactly the opposite. And Prabhupada says, contributions for indulgence in intoxication and gambling are not encouraged here. That sort of contribution is in the mode of ignorance. I don't want to encourage those things. Such charity is not beneficial, rather sinful persons are encouraged. Similarly, if a person gives charity to a suitable person, but without respect and without attention, that sort of charity is also said to be in the mode of darkness. It's partially the respect that makes it important, actually. In the Vedas, you're recognizing your position. You're recognizing how things are interconnected and under the law of God's rule. And so showing respect for the respectable persons is important for our own psychology and for the smooth functioning of the society. And then 23 says, from the beginning of creation, the three words, Om Tat Sat, Prabhupada used to sometimes sign with these words at the end of some of his letters and things, were used to indicate the supreme absolute truth. These three symbolic representations were used by Brahmanas while chanting the hymns of the Vedas and during sacrifice for the satisfaction of the Supreme. And now Prabhupada is saying that here Krishna now is going to really start talking about transcending the modes. That here we're going to add devotion, devotion in the mode of goodness here, devotional goodness which purifies you and takes you beyond this material world. This is where Krishna is now putting a plug for that. He's already showed the difference between those who follow the Vedas and who don't, and shown the difference between those who follow the Vedas in the mode of goodness, which is pretty good, and don't. And now he's going to emphasize what's really beneficial, which is to worship the Lord and to try to get free from the modes altogether. And that's been a recurring theme over these last several chapters. We're spirit souls stuck in this material world. How can we get out? And the answer is always, the best answer is always devotional service. It keeps coming back. Krishna keeps coming back to it. And Prabhupada continuously reminds us of that. That's the focus. That's what Bhagavad Gita is all about. Prabhupada says, it has been explained that penance, sacrifice, charity, and foods are divided into three categories: the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. But whether the first class, second class, or third class, they are all conditioned, contaminated by the material modes of nature. When they are aimed at the Supreme, Om Tat Sat, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Eternal, they become means for spiritual elevation. Okay? Bhagavad Gita recommends, therefore, that any work done should be done for Om Tat Sat, or for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he'll say, while the mode of goodness is okay, bhakti is so much better. Therefore, transcendentalists undertaking performance of sacrifice, charity, and penance in accordance with scriptural regulations, Vedana Uktaha, began always with Om to attain the Supreme, Brahmavadanam, those who are Brahmavadis, or looking for Brahman. Prabhupada just says of the transcendentalists. That's how he translates that. And Prabhupada says, Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam, from the Rig Veda 1:22-20. The lotus feet of Vishnu are the supreme devotional platform. The performance of everything on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead assures the perfection of all activity. Beautiful. That's all. I think that's the entire purport. Just a very sweet little meditation there. The lotus feet of Vishnu, Paramam Padam, Vishnu Paramam Padam, are the supreme devotional platform. The performance of everything on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead assures the perfection of all activity. 25. Without desiring fruit of results, one should perform various kinds of sacrifice, penance, and charity. So again, we're talking in mode of goodness style with the word tat, but we're now aimed at the Supreme. The purpose of such transcendental activities is to get free from material entanglement. So like we said, the bhakti is going to first take us to the mode of goodness and then purify that, take us to transcendence. As far as it goes, there's a it's our practice of bhakti takes us to the mode of goodness, and then that becomes purified, and we come to the stage of bhava, or ecstasy, and that's when we actually transcend. So he says, so we, as long as we haven't transcended yet, we should be doing things in the way that those in the mode of goodness do, but while doing these things for the pleasure of the Lord. We have that attitude of not wanting something in return and doing the kinds of austerities that were mentioned for the mode of goodness. That's beneficial to us. That's why it's useful for us even in bhakti to the other information in this chapter. To be elevated to the spiritual position, one should not act for any material gain. Acts should be performed for the ultimate gain of being transferred to the spiritual kingdom, back to home, back to Godhead. And then 26 and 27, we're coming to the end here. The absolute truth is the objective of devotional service, Prabhupada says, and it is indicated by the word sat. The performer of such sacrifice is also called sat, as are all the works of... This reminds you of chapter 4, doesn't it? Where the butter, the fire, all the different things, elements of the sacrifice were transcendental. The absolute truth is the objective of devotional sacrifice and is indicated by the word sat. The performer of such sacrifice is also called sat, as are all works of sacrifice, penance and charity, which, true to the absolute nature, are performed to please the Supreme Person, O son of Prita. Prabhupada talked about that, how we're trying to convert matter into spirit. So everything that we do that's related to service of the Lord becomes spiritualized. It seems to be, and here it says those things are all sat, eternal. And then Prabhupada says in the purport, the words prashaste karmani, or prescribed duties, indicate that there are many activities prescribed in the Vedic literature, which are purificatory processes, beginning from the time of conception up to the end of one's life. Such purificatory processes are adopted for the ultimate liberation of the living entity. So again, then he says, I guess he's going to say that in the next one. So there's the whole Vedic path, is given that one can, gradually move up to the mode of goodness and up to the higher planetary systems where the sages are and that kind of stuff. That's there, and of course, if we add bhakti to it, then you transcend. He says there's these whole things are there. If we do what's given in the Vedas, using the mentality of the mode of goodness without wishing some gain, and do it for the Lord, then that becomes bhakti. Then he says the word tadartiyam further means offering service to anything which represents the Supreme, for the sake of. Tadartiyam is like for the sake of. Which represents the Supreme, including such service as cooking and helping in the Lord's temple, or any other kind of work for broadcasting the glories of the Lord. These supreme words, Om Tat Sat, are thus used in many ways to perfect all activities and make everything complete. So this opens up the type of activities and penances. It says, so not just sacrifice and penance and charity, but anything that's connected with the Lord's service is considered to become transcendental. And then the last verse today, 28, anything done as a sacrifice, charity, or penance without faith, ashradaya, in the Supreme, O son of Prita, is impermanent. It is called asat and is useless both in this life and the next. And here Prabhupada says, anything done without the transcendental objective, whether it be sacrifice, charity, or penance, is useless. Therefore, in this verse, it is declared that such activities are abominable. Everything should be done for the Supreme in Krishna consciousness. Without such faith and without the proper guidance, there can never be any fruit. And so bhakti and bhakti alone, he's saying. Here, he softens it slightly. He says the mode of goodness is better than the modes of passion and ignorance, but one who takes directly to Krishna consciousness is transcendental to all three modes of material nature, although there is a process of gradual elevation. And so he acknowledges that, because that seems to be appearing here in these chapters, that there's this possibility of being in the mode of goodness and, say, elevating yourself to even up to Lord Brahma's planet and these kind of things. And that's not, it's not that bad. Like up here he says everything else is abominable. You're actually on fairly secure ground, but you're still in the material world. It's still not guaranteed. Although you have a pretty, it's a pretty good outlook for you. Great association, there's not much temptation up there. But you're still in the material world. So, it's a big step down from transcendence, even though it's a big step up from passion and ignorance. Ignorance is taking you all the way down, 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 down. That's very dangerous. And then passion is keeping you in the middle, up to the heavenly planets, down to the earthly planet, up to the heavenly planets, down to the earth planet, and without any end in sight. The up to the planets of the sages, there's a real chance, of making that last step to transcendence, a gradual process of elevation, as Prabhupada says. But he says, although there is a process of gradual elevation, if one, by the association of pure devotees, takes directly to Krishna consciousness, that is the best way, and that is recommended in the chapter. So Prabhupada is saying at the end of this chapter, Krishna is telling us the real deal. He answers Arjuna's questions, right? That it doesn't matter what kind of, whether it's penances, austerities, charities, for that sacrifices, what kind of faith people have, if it's outside of the Vedas, or some objective standard, then that doesn't help them. He answers Arjuna's question. No, it doesn't work. They're simply reinforcing the modes of nature they're already under, and they're already, deeply in the modes of passion and ignorance. They're continuing birth after birth in the Asuric lifestyle. Is not helping them. Only if you take the Vedas and you do it with goodness is there a chance at moving towards real liberation. And even that is a little dicey. So what the real thing you should do, in one sense you can see he's like, why Arjuna are you worrying about these details? Why trying to parse this so much? What you should do is serve me. That's really what you should do. Why worry about the what people do when they're not following the Vedas, and whether that's beneficial or not. Why not just do the thing that's beneficial? He seems to conclude the chapter like that, bringing Arjuna back to the main point that we've seen keeps coming up in these chapters. We had the middle 6 chapters which talked about bhakti exclusively, and here we have understandings and philosophical understandings and information that help us and support us in our practice of bhakti, but they still also keep coming to that point that that's the real thing we should be doing. Even though it's sometimes it's said that these chapters are about knowledge or jnana. They're the type of jnana that can lead people to bhakti if they're not already there. But for us who are already there, it gives us information that helps us to strengthen our bhakti and to help us in our devotional service. So that concludes the chapter for today, and we'll start. We're going to start chapter 18 next week. It's a long chapter and an important one, summarizing so many things. So we're going to cover it, I think, in maybe 4 or even 5 sessions. It's going to be a long one.